Hello, everyone, and welcome to Series 2, Episode 1 of the Rally DNA podcast. Thanks again for joining us. This week, we have a fantastic special guest, Paul Howarth of Prodrive, one of the men responsible for the Group A E30 M3. Thanks very much for joining us, Paul.
Good evening.
So this week, we've chosen to focus primarily on a particular car, one that the discussion on actually led to the inception of this podcast and the desire to cover this kind of content. So before we begin, I'm going to talk a little about why this car stands out to me and why it's remained something that's so special to rally fans the world over. For any card-carrying bobble hatter, one of the chief influences of what makes a car on a special stage stand out as special is the sound it makes and the emotion that invokes on you as a spectator. Now, it goes without saying that throughout BMW's rich history in motorsport and with road cars, they've produced some incredible sounding power plants, from the V12 found in the McLaren F1, the S85 V10 in the E60 M5, and a whole heap of very pleasing inline sixes. For me, the howling 4-pot 2.3 litre S14 in motorsport trim trumps the lot.
Certainly up there, one hell of a noise. I've always really appreciated the sort of weird sector that the E30 represents, that sort of tiny spell where a two-wheel drive, very specialised tarmac racer could trump quite ponderous all-wheel drive Group A cars. Didn't last for very long, and it couldn't, but it's always fascinated me. And let's face it, the E30 is by far the most charismatic of them all.
Yeah, I'll never forget the first time standing on a closed road tarmac stage and being passed by that timeless box-arched body, the engine close to its 9k RPM rev limit, and truly spine-tingling experience, and one that never fades with repeat occurrences. And while that gloriously high-revving inline 4 is undoubtedly the beating heart of the M3, it is but one part in many. And in order for such an elite roster of drivers like Bernard Begwin, Billy Coleman, Patrick Snyers, Mark Dewey, and Bertie Fisher to pull off their on-stage heroics, they needed a capable machine prepared by an outfit who knew how to get the most from a platform and run it successfully on events. And that outfit was the Banbury-based Prodrive. And of course, that's why we've enlisted Paul here to talk us through some of the history of the car.
Yeah, maybe a few of your listeners might recall a bit of the early days of the M3 on Circuit of Ireland. I actually started at Prodrive at the beginning of '89, so I missed a little bit of the real adventure. But I do like your anecdote about the high revving, what we would call, P10 chip, which was a rev limiter of 9.8. It was in the days where you would noise check wasn't the thing you needed to pass, especially in Europe. The noisier, the better. So there was some, heard some cars, a twin silencer system for the World Championship events, but predominantly throughout wherever it competed, it was virtually straight through open pipe. So you'd hear them for miles
Nice.
and miles, especially on a recce as well, because we'd use full spec Group A cars for practice. So
Halcyon days.
Yeah, so there were different days than what they are now. So I think you've hit the nail on the head. You missed one key driver there, Francois Chatriot, one of the most successful drivers in the multiple French tarmac champion. He was a man towards the end that still would fight the Lanciers in places like Corsica. And in the French Championship, Bruno Sarbi could never get the measure of Francois, especially in 1990, the last year of it. He was unique in that car. We didn't quite, in 90, Corsica didn't quite come off, but I think there was 3 BMWs in the top 10, if I'm right. So it was still a phenomenal car. And then the era of Irish tarmac was special as well, which were some great years. As everyone tells you, when you go to Ireland, this is Irish tarmac. There's a lot to learn, and there's a lot of great people out there can give you quite a few tips, whether it be about the shiny tar or the bumps or all the anomalies, what you find from north to south of Ireland. So we managed to fine tune a car to take on a lot of the Ford competitors. Bertie was the first stalwart of that, and then followed by Austin. And they had their own ideas of how to develop the car, and both of them had different tracks of development, but both were very successful in the cars and delivered championships.
So you as you say, you joined Prodrive in '89, Paul. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and you found yourself working right away on the M3, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, no, it's, I think the first job, yeah, it was a very small team then. There was 5 people, like Chris Dale, he lives over in Ireland, and Simon Steele, and a few other lads who've been around the game a long time. And the first job was the Corsica test car, getting that ready to go to Corsica test. Then it wasn't like these big factory. Well, like you run a big factory team now is 5 people to build a car, and it was you worked a lot on your own. And Prodrive was unique then because one week you'd do a rally car, the next week you might be doing a race car, a 24-hour race car, or you might be out on a recce, so on your own, just operating anywhere in Europe. At that year, we did French Championship, Belgium Championship, and World Championship. We marked Duez, 4 rounds. We marked, starting with did Monte Carlo, Portugal, Finland, San Remo. So that's only 4. But so Mark was in the FINA car, and then Belgium Championship, he was there in the FINA car, and then 2 cars in the Tarmac Championship. In France, the French Tarmac Championship, which is phenomenally competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And then prior to that, the Italian Championship with Andrea Zanussi, which he won. So yeah, there's quite a lot of development going on. I think then it was coming to the end of its what you can add to an M3 homologation, and Prodrive had its sights on bigger things.
Mm-hmm.
But so we had the concept of the 6-speed gearbox and a few of the small updates to the car. But predominantly the engines would come from BMW Motorsport as a package. Mm-hmm. Transmissions and all sub-assemblies are all done in-house. Mm-hmm. It was a very simple car to build. You could build one very quick.
Going back briefly to the beginning, I mean, were you aware of the amount of painstaking development work that had been undertaken in the years prior to your joining, and also how significant a deal it was for Prodrive as a company, coming off the back of what must have been quite a bruising Group B dalliance with the Metro?
Prodrive always a spirit of winning, no matter what. I think the base car, if you look at the homologation and the base car, E30 race car, I mean, there's probably over hundreds in the European touring car scene. BMW was a massive production machine, so there's lots of teams, so that's why the engine becomes so bulletproof. The development was more of the reliability, I would imagine, like most rally development programs. So the car was very simple. It was normally with a rally car, if you pick all the best 5 components to build it, you'll have a reliable car. So it had AP brakes, it had Belstein suspension, it had Motortronic electronics, it had Premier fuel systems, it had Bosch pumps. So it was so simple and unique. If you compare it with today's development of a rally car, it was completely different. Completely different. The base model was so close to being right. But yeah, you're aware because it's a winning team and very well structured, and the parts are really well made, and you very rarely see any failures. So there's a lot gone on, a lot of learning. If you look back on the history, I'm doing some work on the moment on a lot of our early cars. And yeah, there was some learning pain from Circuit of Ireland with both cars stopping early in the stages.
Was that a fuel issue?
Well, I think, I don't know, some of the listeners, some people who was close on the day, I've still got the original documents from the debrief. We've still got them in our archive. And I was only reading them last week when you asked me about this interview, and it doesn't never come to a conclusion.
Oh, really?
Really?
Yeah. It was a mixture of, Charles Reynolds was the team manager then, and Charles was an incredibly structured, detailed man. And if you read a Charles document, it covers absolutely everything. But I got to the end of it and thought, well, maybe that was one of 5 things. Maybe somebody knows somewhere, but it could have been fuel pickup, it could have been electronics. Who knows? There's all sorts of mystery, but the cars did start up, I believe, afterwards and never appeared again.
Yeah, well, they quite swiftly became, as far as Group A rally cars could be, fairly Swiss watch reliable, didn't they? Certainly by the time you joined, I imagine it was par for the course that bomb-proof reliability, maybe not a given, but certainly expected.
Well, yeah, I mean, on a recce, if you're doing a practice, and we were practicing with full Group A cars then, so they're doing 3 times a mileage. Rallies weren't short then, and you'd service before and after every stage anyway. But you were servicing in 5 minutes and 10 minutes. So having, like they have service parks now, and you get 45 minutes is pretty well unheard of. An end of leg service in the French Championship would be 20 minutes. In Belgium, you're struggling for 3 or 4 minutes at the end of each stage. And so you had to be completely reliable. Again, as we say, a bit Swiss watch. There was some things to look at. There's if you didn't replace the rear diff studs, the rear diff would drop out. You had to do them every rally. Austin will tell you that. That's what happened in Killarney. So there's a few things were stressed to the edge, and you maybe would have looked at it a bit differently with today's technology.
There's a Bernard Begrin quote that only the engine was in Munich by the time from Munich, by the time he got in the car. So presumably, you guys must have done quite a lot of in-house development and fine tuning and changing components to get to that ultimate package.
Yeah, there was lots of local, there's lots of local companies involved. As you work with, the people like Dawkins for radiators, and would be fabric. It was at a time when Prodrive was growing. There's probably only 2 or 3 people in the fabrication department. There was 3 people in sub-assembly. There was 1 wiring guy, So I suppose when you've got a smaller team like that, the quality does go up quite a bit, because there is a lot of ownership. You get to work with people. It doesn't want to be your bit that fails, and that's what makes a good team.
Sure, name above the door.
Yeah. So I keep saying it. You can't believe how simple an M3 is. I can picture it in my mind. There's nothing to them. I think the biggest development that year was, like I said, the Gatrag 265 gearbox, which was in the Manta 400, as you know, but different. Instead of a donut drive we had a donut drive on the back. We did a 6-speed dog box, which was an adaptation of a sandwich plate and extract gears. An extract was very small then. It wasn't a massive gear conglomerate it is of today. It was a small operation, so it was growing like Prodrive was. So there's a few teething problems with new tech with fusion welding on gears, but there's a few things what we had some transmission failures, but that got cured fairly early on. And then later on, it went, the Achilles heel was a crown wheel and pinion, but we were then homologated the 7 series rear diff, which really made it completely bomb-proof.
That's fascinating, purely because, Killian, in researching this, dug up a fascinating period article from 1987 with the cars in the lead, an interview with David Richards in the lead up to 1987. And in it, they are sort of pinpointed the differential as being a perhaps area, or David Lapworth rather, a perhaps area of concern. And they weren't quite sure about it, being as it's before Tour de Course 1987. But it's interesting as that evidently came to pass. Yeah,
it's the last fuse before the it's the last fuse of talking. So it's taking a massive amount of load. Hence why a Cosworth Sierra standard is 7-inch and Rally's 9-inch. Rear differential. So once that was in, but we're well versed as a team then. We could probably do a rear diff change in 7 minutes. We could do a gearbox in about 10 minutes. So not a clutch, but a box, because there's not a lot holding it in. So and that's why you do the sport, isn't it? To the mechanics want to have their moment as much as the drivers do.
And what was the main driving force to pull the Getrag 265 and replace it with the 6-speed unit? What was the main motivation there?
Probably because it's quite lazy on its gear change, for sure. A dog engagement is always quicker and torque transfers a lot better. So it wanted shorter ratios, lower down as well. It's quite long in its lower ratios. So it's just a good tidy up of all ratios and giving it that. I think it was about 7. I can't remember the number, but it was giving it that little bit more top end as well, because the rallies were so fast then. So it was matching the box to the engine. bearing in mind the box was designed for a 230 horsepower engine. And and the ratios were then matched to a 300 horsepower unit. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
Sure does.
I imagine the suspension was one of the key area of development compared to the road car, sorry, the circuit races. Was that something that you had any control over at the time?
No, it was very, in Prodrive then, the spec sheet was the Bible. My words, Ian Morton was like the chief thing. It's a bit same how it is now. You do not vary from the spec sheet. And to be honest, I've seen it so many times through release of customers of all the models we've ever built. People will find better ways, and they might find something you've spent millions on trying to develop, and they might find something you've missed, which is welcome. But 9 times out of 10, what it says on the tin, it's been done through years of experience and different roads and different drivers, and learning is painful in motorsport if you get it wrong. If you can go to a rally and get the setup wrong, and it costs you a world championship, or it costs you a European championship. And they're big decisions to make. So then they really control the spec. And to be honest, I never saw much ever change. I can still remember the rear toe figure, the front toe figure, the cambers, the caster. I mean, it's always a unique car to drive. A lot of the Irish drivers would learn that very quickly on the cambered roads, because it had 10 degrees of caster. So it was no power steering. It was a man's car. You had to be hold of it, and I think that's why Austin and Bertie did so well. Coming from the Mantas, they were quite a man's car to drive. With no power steering and quite a lot of acumen, and so the numbers have never changed that much. The damper settings again has never changed that much. Then there was some weight saving going to titanium springs and things like this, which slightly changed. But the valving of the damping, where now you'll hear everyone on every single rally, or any driver who's any driver will be talking about valving on dampers.
Yeah.
Well, then you'd go, no, that wasn't part of the conversation. The car worked, the car was consistent, and it did what it said. And that's what allowed the drivers to know its traits, so it fit them like a glove. For sure, ride out could be a big, is always a cheap way of making a car feel more stable, stuff like that in French Championship. But yeah, are you 10 mil down in France and 15 mil up in Ireland? Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There is some basic things you do. But what we do know about a BMW was if you started playing with the geometry too much, it ruined the car.
So it's quite a sort of narrow window in which to operate in that respect.
Yeah. If you didn't spend a lot of time, and maybe some of the lads who were listening were involved, then if you didn't have the caster exactly right, someone says something feels just not right at the front, and there'll be them feelings that get back of you, which is a bit like a doctor's pill for the headache. But if you just go and check them 3 things first, you'll probably stumble across the fix pretty quick. It's not going to be something drastic. People talk about body shells and no, it'll be something simple.
Speaking of body shells, would I be right in saying that the shells that arrived at Prodrive were the matter prepared ones that were originally touring car shells, essentially, before you guys got your hands on them?
No, you could order. Yeah, some cars would. It depend on the order. It's a couple of tubes. There's a cross tube on a touring car. There's I think, can't remember exactly. I think there's 24-hour shell, endurance shell, 24-hour race shell has 2 extra tubes. It has 2 extra tubes in the rally car. A British touring car or a European touring car has 1 long tube. You'll have seen it on the TV across. And that would normally either be removed by matter, pre us getting it, or we'd have a race shell in stock and it'd get removed.
Was that the one that was triangulated, sort of running behind the dashboard bulkhead sort of thing?
Correct, yeah. And then on the 24-hour shells, there's one coming up from the right-hand side as well, which goes through to the left-hand turret top. They're very rare. They were just for the 24-hour shells. So Matter Germany, again, there were the base shell as a body shell is so strong. It's very, very minimum amount of seam welding, but just in key places. So the front struts, binders on the side, you see that. They come with a pedal box in, which is a standard BMW motorsport pedal box. If you get the BMW parts manual now, you can still pick out most of the parts in there, all the wiring parts, all the dashboard parts. The Germans are so good at that detail. If you got a build book for an M3, we have them. You can still look at it today and go, well, you could still build a beautiful car from it.
I mean, you said that wasn't the case with Austin Rover.
Well, yeah. Wish it was though. It's British. So.
Yeah.
Somebody maybe should have. Then again, we built the Spitfire, didn't we? So how did we not get the Metro right?
Well, very true.
To return to the suspension for a second, would you have said that the rear end, like with the semi-trailing arm, did that cause a bit of an issue in terms of setup for the bumpier or the loose surface events? Obviously this is a car meant for tracks.
Rear squat and getting rear, keeping it simple, getting bite in the rear. I mean, I remember we're in Finland doing the shakedown. It was the days when only two of you got there with a rally car and you just got the driver at the end of the day and went off and did a shakedown. Now they take 30 people or whatever. Yeah, we've all done it. I think it was Due's driving. It was Finland, and he did a 7K stage, and the trip, because he used to read off the rear, was reading 14K, and he had 7K wheel spin.
Wow.
So, I mean, you've all seen the films, how spectacular it was, and did the car do it? If you look at it in hindsight, and maybe David Latworth or people say something different, but did it do warrant enough gravel events to really focus and work on it and get it better? No, it did San Remo, which is half, 1,000 lakes, and a few customers run them on gravel, but it's such a hard car to drive on gravel.
Duez could sure pedal it on gravel, in fairness to him. He got some good results in that car.
Fifth in San Remo, right?
Duez. I think we're ninth. We're ninth.
We're ninth. Was it ninth? I thought it was a sixth at some point in San Remo.
There was a sixth at some point, I think. It mightn't have been San Remo, but I think he was sixth on some gravel event.
Portugal.
That was it. Yeah.
Portugal. Yeah, that year, Portugal. Yeah, and so the fog helped him there, I think. But Mark was, he's a good example of a driver who's grown up in Porsches, Group 4 Escorts.
We should remember, because we did have him on, so we should have remembered that.
No, I was going to say, it seems that weather unwittingly played a key role in the E30 rally story, because it was on the 1987 Tour de Course. Am I correct in saying there was a hailstorm that briefly denied you guys the lead?
No, Mark was, no, he's right there. I think there was 4 cars there, 3 cars, I had 3 cars. But Mark, in Belgium, it was mighty. And so was Gregoire the last year with the Alcatel Bell car. But Mark is such a driver. Yeah. Him and Patrick are the same. I don't know, Patrick's a bit more flamboyant, but Mark could turn it on when he wanted. Yeah, so the rear geometry was, it could have, I'm sure there's things you could have done. There was a very simplistic toe and camber setting in the rear, which is a sliding piston. So the toe was a rose joint this way, which always holds the toe, and then a sliding thing. Then your minimum camber was about 1.5 minutes you could get, and it just neck out. And then the engine, I think the engine was the biggest thing. It's a tap, which we learnt in Ireland in a big way. In the early days with Fisher, we had to make the engines a lot more progressive. So it is, when we say a P10, the P10 engines, the last ones from motorsport, we call them P because they have a P10 EPROM in the ECU. Mm-hmm. The rev limiter is 9.8, and there's nothing happening before 6.
Crikey.
So they're up there
uncompromising.
So they're up there a lot where Austin, recognised this very early on in Ireland, just in the damp wet. He just didn't have the traction, and worked very hard with Swindon to do a milder engine, which he got a lot more tractable, and so did Bertie, who worked with him to get more drivability. So them cars then from as low as 3,000 RPM, they were just torque. They just didn't spin the wheels. You probably see that on a lot of if you watch the early videos and the later ones.
Would you say that was one of the sort of the most significant developments over the lifespan of the car?
Yeah, for a customer, that's a good example of a customer taking a car, seeing what it needed for their environment. That customer being at a level which is up there, it's not. They are competitive, and they're willing to take on the works drivers in their own environment. So, I think it was. Would that have worked on gravel? Probably yes, 100%. Mm-hmm. But there's no development, as I understood it. Then there was no development money from BMW, and Prodrive we're winning every rally in France. We're winning most rallies in Belgium. And we're winning British Touring Car Championships consistently. You can't get complacent, but there's the answer, really.
I mean, that was going to be one of my next questions, because I've always been fascinated by what seems to be a fairly sort of not especially committed attitude from BMW, or at least a sort of undecided idea about this muddy, grimy motorsport compared to their usual fare. What was it like working with BMW in Munich, or was it fairly
in my role then? I learned a lot when I worked with them on the mini program. But that wasn't back then. I wouldn't know that'd be something for David or I mean, we still got. They were very close to us on, the technical bulletins. They treat all their support teams the same. So you'd got books and books of technical bulletins that released, like we released to our customers. Mm-hmm. So you'd always get that information. We're a key customer because all the engines would go back there. Key client because the works cars, like the cars in Belgium were sponsored by BMW. They run the BMW Belgian banner. The cars in France run the French motorsport banner. So example, there'd always be a cocktail event which the cars would go to in France at BMW agents before the rally. So as you know, there's many owners of success. There's not many owners of failure. So when I could say when they win, everyone's over the moon. But I don't think it's no different than they are with anybody. Having worked with me in the mini one, there was a lot of things about mud on cars and all the rest of it, but there wasn't any mud on the Corsica winning car, really, was there?
You realise you've just signed yourself up unwittingly for a follow-up episode on the BMW Mini.
Yeah.
I guess it shows that, BMW's attitude to what they wanted from that program. They were at home on circuits. They wanted to dominate regional and national events on tarmac, and that's what they wanted from that. They didn't want to set out to be running a full World Rally Championship program. That's not what they wanted, really, I guess. Would that be fair to say?
I've got to be honest, I wouldn't really know. I couldn't. Yeah, it's probably a fair point. I mean, you've got to remember then BMW was winning everything. We were winning, in Europe. They probably had 100 cars out every weekend in different touring car championships. Some of the biggest European teams were running factory BMWs. So it's a unique situation where you end up with a great car, a great product, and everyone's doing the marketing for you. And, so it's only what, Prodrive's done over many years is when the cars go out to customers' hands, you can have this weekend, we've probably had, I don't know, probably 30 cars out worldwide racing. And that's just in the racing, that's just with Aston Martin program. So you can have weekends where there's 50 or 60 cars out, all Prodrive cars, promoting the manufacturer you've developed the car for, and taking services from you. So.
Awesome stuff. Were you aware of a sort of concerted effort to try and shed weight from the car over its lifespan at the Prodrive?
Yeah, Prodrive is like most motorsport teams, we're fanatical about weight, and even more that back then, you know, everyone was fanatical about weight on any rally car, whether it be right down to driver and co-driver. So, but back then there wasn't many championships where the cars weren't weighed after most stages. There's a lot, in my opinion, there's a lot more weighing going on then than there was not. What there is today. You know, I think I remember the first time they weighed cars in Ireland was like 98 or something. You know, so imagine. But no, the homologation weight and fuel amount, and yeah, there's always the debate: no spare wheel. You know, then you had a lot of options not to run a spare wheel because you had a van before and after every stage. And David Lapworth is a you know, and everyone was then. You're fanatical about weight. It has to hit homologation dry weight. If you're not, I mean, then you couldn't achieve it without being in a position for ballast. Where car design now, you end up with a lot of ballast. Where then there's very little ballast.
So over the 2 years, kind of between 87 and 89, you guys managed to shed about 100 kilos from the car. Would that be close enough to accurate?
Yeah, I think, yeah. But if you look at, not from, it depends whose car you weigh, and who come up with a number in the beginning, you know, and which cage it was for a start. Was it, you know, and which a rally car it doesn't morph weight, it gains weight over a race car. It's straightforward stuff, but whether it be the co-driver's seat, foot plate, you know, we wouldn't even, that back then, if you know, the map, it was like to get a map box in a car, co-drivers were virtually crying to get anything put in the car. But then you got a lightweight jack. You gain on the fuel side because you've not got a 140 litre race endurance tank, you've just got a 60 litre tank. But could you take, was there attention to detail in every build of every nut and bolt went on the car? Yes.
I've seen reports that, you know, obviously, you know, again, in all motorsport, extensive uses of aluminium with things like the bonnet hinge mechanism being replaced for an aluminium item. The pedal box ended up going to aluminium items. You know, so those kind of measures are obviously right across the board.
Yeah, well, you know, there's certain things you just draw a line off. You know, I don't think there's the brave boys who would, you know, do aluminium pedals. Yes, because they're formed and they can be made nicely. But you know, was the titanium pedal box frames tried? Was the different, you know, minimum weight seat runners, best weight seats? You can remember then it was a time when seats were a lot lighter than they are today.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lightweight Recaro was a lightweight Recaro.
Mm-hmm.
When you think of the safety extent we go to now with the weight of a seat, there wouldn't be a tool roll in the car because it's serviced at the end of the stage. There'd be a lot of small details which are missed, which would be focused on to make sure it could come off the stage and it would pass a weight check. But if you're asking if the shell, there's a detailed list of tidying to do when a shell came in, but there wasn't any, you know, like today, not any World Rally Car engineer will tell you they build a shell from flat pack, they focus, you know, they work so hard. That's why the FIA weigh the shells at the factories first, a base shell for a road car, to stop you getting ahead that way. So the biggest weight probably, so it's a plastic boot lid, for example, there's no weight to be gone there, and all bumper inners and everything were all light, and so all that sort of detail.
I suppose also there was a lot more skullduggery going on back then, or at least there appeared to be more skullduggery going on there. At least,
Yeah. I mean, there wasn't much weight in the exhaust, as you can imagine. There wasn't. But like, for example, we'd run in the rear drive shaft inners. There's 6 bolts normally on each side. We'd run 3 and 3 drive pegs, not because it's lighter, but main point is we're going to have to undo 3, not 6. So there was things like that. I can't. Yeah, it was on weight. There's lots of Lancia would. I suppose lots of people are doing lots of other things. So it's up to them, innit?
Were you aware at the time of the sort of being an underdog, at least compared to Lancia? And was it a sort of point of pride of punching above your weight as a team and for BMW?
I think you used to look at Lancia and think, wow, in awe. And sometimes you'd look at the amount of people and equipment and everything. But I mean, it's Goliath answering it. You everybody's beatable, including yourself. You can beat yourself by not being smart. So it was a very proud team to work for. Everyone was very proud. Just small detail, like always the vans are always clean, and your expenses are always done on time, and everything. People laugh at me now saying, they miss when they leave Prodrive reversing into your parking space, because that's what you do. So looking at Lancia, and then Toyota were about then. They're a massive organisation, but there's a massive pride in taking them on and beating them. But they took this up. They took it very serious. They knew the BMW was a big threat to beat them on the day, which it could.
And how many people were in Prodrive at the time compared to today, just to give us an idea of the kind of the growth of the organization in the last 30 odd years?
So I was employee number 34. And then in the workshops, then I think there was 8 of us, and there was 3 senior technicians. They were the guys like Pete Ollie had worked with, David at Ford, Rothman at Ford, Dick Goodman was at Talbot, Ian Morton was at Talbot, David Lapworth was ex-Talbot, and then the other couple of the lads were ex-Austin Rover. There wasn't, and that was a team which was doing touring cars and things. There's probably 8 of us in the workshop, very small team. Then the sales operation had just really started, and Ian Perry was there with David and a few people in stores. It was just like, to be honest, it was like a family garage. People listening who work in a garage, they know you go and have the crack at the store's counter. It's a bit like that. So now, colossal, it grew into thousands, lots of people across lots of parts of the business, whether it be the automotive business, the racing, the racing team was a big operation. The rally team was a big operation. It was nearly 100 people. It's a big machine to turn up to. So, and then compare with today, it ebbs and flows. It goes up and down as the programs change. When we start the size of the World Endurance Team, which stopped last year, but then we've got a massive customer operation with support. So in the workshops now, there's probably 35 people. We've got probably 10 designers, 15 event engineers, and then all the stuff that comes on top of that, stores people, which are as important, fabricators, engine group, probably total cross engine group 15 people, fabrication 10 people. So it's still it's a colossal, it's a lot. It's a big machine.
I was lucky enough to be shown around for writing a feature article last year, and the size and the scale of the place, it's just staggering for someone who, I don't know what I expected really, given I've sort of followed Prodrive since the early 90s, but my God, every base covered.
Yeah. It was good with that new site. We did that in the middle of a hectic program. We did it in around 6 or 8 months to get that place knocked up, but still run the races and do everything and move the factory and clear out from the old factory. But that's part of the adventure, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I suspect this is kind of an obvious question with an obvious answer, but how key was the E30 to Prodrive's evolution in the immediate years afterward? The Subaru deal was your success you'd had with that a key part of what convinced the top brass at Subaru to
Well, I think when any manufacturers, what I'd imagine back then was the credentials. You can go and win at world championship level with this team of can-do, very focused attitude, which is very much in Japanese culture. But again, when all of a sudden you go from being the one chasing, an odd win now and again, then when you're trying to chase 12 wins every year, it becomes a different animal. But I would imagine it paid. It got it over the line, and I'm really grateful it did, because I've had a fantastic 20 years since that, when that started, or 25 years when we started with that. So the credentials were there. You can't. It's like going for a job, isn't it? If you've nothing on your CV, it's going to be quite a short interview if you get an interview.
Yeah.
So,
you can only fluff so much.
One Corsica, and we're constantly, they're constantly matching people in the top 10 of the world championship. Their ambition is to be world champions. Then it definitely, it definitely fit the Japanese culture of underdog, fight it through and deliver.
Did you have any sort of special rivalry with Ford at the time, bearing in mind it was another rear-wheel drive front engine thing, even if it was a turbo as opposed to an NA car?
Because of that, there was Ford Borum, and there was RED.
Mm-hmm.
So there was the Scouts, the boys from Liverpool, should I say? But they and RED were doing with Oriole in the French Championship, and then at RED, then there was people like John Millington, Alan McGuinness, a lot of lads we've gone on to work with and got great respect for. So I used to do the recce's in France, and Millie would do the recce's as well, and we'd do the notes for where to stop to service, and just great camaraderie. So Borum were a bit different. They're they were a completely different culture. Essex, different gang. But I think it was always another bunch of Brits against everyone else again. So I think that there's mutual respect. But would you give in over a lay-by because you wanted it serviced? No.
Wouldn't extend that far.
No. And if you're racing a van back, you're going to get back. You're going to get there. So it's you've got to have respect for your opposition, haven't you? But you've also got to be willing to beat them any way you can.
It sounds like it was like a real sweet spot in terms of the championship and your involvement in it, in terms of it being professional enough to be all over the world and be followed, but still, low key enough for that kind of sort of rivalry and friendliness to still take part, to still be a part.
Yeah. I mean, everyone thinks the past was always better than the future, but I mean, to grow up, to get, to be exposed to. You don't think for yourself too much. Well, you do if it depends on your job, but everything's quite well structured in this world we live in, isn't it? Even you can't go to a car park without paying at the meter. There's lots of stuff which is so controlled. Then, fortunately enough, you had to think for yourself, and that was really enjoyable because you would take chances, and you would push to the, you'd give it that bit more, and with the consequence just being the result. Where now, if it's not everything's watching you now, isn't it? And you can imagine now if you pulled in doing some servicing, you'd be on social media in a split second.
Before they're out of the car.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not how it was, and then everything comes with how organised you are. And Prodrive back then were phenomenally organised. People like Charles Reynolds and a lot of the lads then, they were very well. I mean, unbelievably experienced people. They'd been around the block a long time, and for example, Prodrive used to assist Lancia with the lads co-driving their team round when they come over to the RAC.
That's incredible.
So some lads would go with them, and because David had worked a lot with everyone knew everybody, and you've got to use the tools. You've got to use any tools. So you go to Africa, you need good contacts in Africa. If you go to Italy, you build this network of the people within teams and within countries which can assist you to get your goal. And then if somebody was really struggling, then you would never turn your back on them. If one of their van broke down or something, you'd always stop to see if you could. I've got a great picture somewhere where the van broke down. I had the rally car on the back, and RED stopped in France, and we put the van, the trailer on their transporter. You got Ford Motor Company on top, and you've got a BMW on the back. But can you imagine, that's respect and camaraderie. That's just like helping your next man out. So.
If you did that these days, the marketing men of either side would have a fit, wouldn't they?
You just watch the palavers in Formula One to understand that, but that's what I mean. But if you ask about the camaraderie with the teams, strong respect, but and everyone could look each other in the eye and know if they needed help, you'd do it. But if you wanted to win, they knew you were going to do anything to win as well.
I suppose also with the nature of when it was, there were a lot of the guys working in all these teams had sort of earned their crust in the early Group 4 era and had been there for 20 years since the mid 70s or whatever, and therefore had huge amounts of experience.
Then you didn't, because then you look at a colossal service park where nobody will touch a finger on the car until the engineer's done the job list, and it's all very, 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 very structured, and we're very similar. But then there's just two of you at the end of the stage. If it's got a misfire, you better fix it. If it needs a gearbox, you better put it in, and you have to make a decision. And it's quite strange, then decision making. 9 times out of 10, you do make the right one. But now, so and which give you a lot of reward as well, and the people you work with, you learn to be like really more cohesive. So everyone has strengths in the team. So when teams are so small like that, you do find out who's the best guy to do certain things and who's not, and then so the leader of the team can just float them around and get the best outcome.
Great time to experience, no doubt, and for you as well, then to be part of something that was kind of starting to flourish and grow, and then as Group A advanced, it must have been a great time for your career and to be part of that journey.
Phenomenal. So we're still doing BMWs when Legacy started running. So, for example, when we went to Acropolis, I think we finished. I was literally came back to Banbury, changed vehicles, and back out to Greece.
Would that be the one with Alan in the Legacy?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then straight out to that, and I remember the shakedown there is me. There's 3 of us. 3 or 4 of us. That was all there was for the shakedown. And Marku went off second corner into the stage or whatever. So again, massive learning, unbelievable amount of learning for the team. Do Acropolis, which is, Greece is a phenomenal event to do. It's in it's in June, and summer's Greece. The stages are incredible, and the place has a real challenge about it. And my words, the end of a stage, you're going to do one hell of a job to keep it going. So we started that rally, and we got 3 days in, and then we retired. And the Tarzan stage, which is a well-known stage, and then went on to Thousand Lakes and San Remo, but still doing all the French Championship for the BMWs. And then after that, the story really begins the year after. Car got paced, drivers got paced, could have won earlier possibly, and then leading into the mega customer era with legacies, which was phenomenal, especially in Ireland. Kenny was first recipient of a Group A car.
Yeah.
And then 30 followed. And then how many hundreds after that? It's the World Rally Car era. Then the Impreza was another phenomenal story. I was heavily involved in the customer side then, and we'd run, and a lot of lads from Ireland used to come, Robbie McGurk, Wesley Emerson, Ian Bishop, Ian Curland, quite a few others used to come to Indonesia, and we used to run 5 cars in Indonesia.
Part of the Asia Pacific, would that be?
No, it was just for the national championship for locals. So we'd put 6 or 7 Imprezas into Indonesia, sales wise. And they were doing the national championship and doing Australia. So the Asian Pacific at the time, it was still, that was running as well. So that was Malaysia, Hong Kong, Beijing. Did we do Hong Kong, Beijing with the legacy? I can't remember. I think we did.
I think I recall that. Yeah.
Ari and Possum, and Possum won, I think. Yeah, I think Possum won. And then we did it the following year with Imprezas.
It was around this time that you managed to, and I realize I'm straying away from the BMW here, but am I correct in saying you managed to convince Japan to let Prodrive do the engine development in-house for the legacy around this?
Yeah, I think David Latworth and David had convinced. That was about a year. Probably if San Remo was the first time we run or RAC. No, I think it was RAC was the first time.
I've heard that was quite a watershed moment.
It was, because the guy who I used to work with a lot on BMWs, Bill King, he was from Andy Roust, and he'd been around forever, and he was just an incredibly talented mechanic. So he started doing the engine, because he used to do Roust's engines for the Touring Car Championship, the RS 500s. So he started them, and there were some engineers. We recruited quite a few more engineers who were learning as well, but we had a lot of calibration engineers come from Japan, but then we had our own calibration engineers who were learning and going along. So then the engine group grew colossal then into a joint JC where Japan had their own dynos and they were doing a lot of development. It was very well structured. One of the strongest parts was the engine development program. That's so well structured, because it was really, it got people involved who really were so proud to get the engine to the level, to get the Boxer engine where they got it, and the proof is in the pudding. It became so reliable and went on and on and on, and reliability was so. You've got your Achilles heels with any cars or any development, but once they were fixed, it just went on and on to be. You weren't worried about the engine when you started a rally. So the engine shop there was 2 dyno cells, probably 35 people in at the height, 7 engineers.
Would height have been mid-late 90s, I assume?
Yeah, because then we would, obviously all customer engines came back to the factory. And then you're doing customer programs. Remember in All Stars then, I was running up to 10 cars on World Championship events in All Stars. And mileages were a lot higher then. So, the customer side, you'd probably have, any one time per week, you'd have 5 customer engines in on a cycle. And a development program and a works program. So hence why it grew. It was a big department. And still today, the engine group we do all the Aston engines, we do the Dakar engines. We did all to give you some idea of capability, when we did RX 3 years ago, in 9 months, they designed, released, and developed a complete new engine.
It's truth.
Certainly impressive.
So it gives you the scope of skill what's in there, and that's where guys are still in there who were there 20 years ago. You can't. There's no shortcuts to that experience. Whether it be the lads building them or the design team.
Sounds like as a company you're quite good at sort of building that expertise and retaining it in the company.
Yeah. I mean, I expect a lot of people with a long service is quite a thing, and it's quite a proud thing for people who've been there. And you can either be, I think, in a team. I always tell people either become the best mechanic or the best electrician or whatever, or if you've got other ambitions, become the best in that job, and the next door will open. So there's people who want to move on into management and they want to take on as much responsibility, and there's never a shortage of them jobs, people who really want to take it, but it comes with a massive, you need to really commit, take responsibility. And it's ideal for an organisation. For example, the Dakar car. In COVID, we completely developed that car. So in November, it was agreed we were doing Dakar the year after. So the design team had been working on it for a while, but we didn't know which concept we're going to go with. COVID started. So we'd been to Dakar, designed and developed a car in that first year of COVID, built it, and was in Dubai testing in a year later. And then 2 months later, 6 weeks later, we're starting Dakar with a 2-car team.
Am I right in saying there was a change in regulated wheel diameter between one of those Dakar seasons as well, which must have put a spanner in the works as far as suspension development, or at least an extra stumbling block?
No, we'd really needed it for the tyre. So we really needed it. And it was, you come back from every event with a bit of a wash up, or a big wash up of what could have been. The biggest factor was punches. And you just know when you start a section in the car, even on the test, you can sit there, we're going to get a puncture here. So that the durability of the tyre wasn't there. And the other class cars had that advantage, so we needed to level that up. And the track width gave other advantages as well. So it's a massive piece of kit. People don't realize how big a Dakar car is till you get up to it. Remembering it's got a 500-litre fuel tank in it.
Yeah, they're a big thing.
They're a big thing, but they're amazing in the desert. You'd think you was in a small rally car.
I love how they've developed over the years. You can trace a line between the stuff that you guys are doing now and those revolutionary Schlesser buggies from 20 years ago. The Galois sponsored things. Awesome bits of kit.
Yeah, and full respect for them boys who go out there and do it. It's a colossal event, and it's something you learn. You're always learning something new all the time. And there was some, we learned some big lessons there, and we continue to do so. But hopefully the boys can, open. The win's going to come. There is an element of luck. There is an element of making your own luck. But if you can have a clean run and hit the waypoints, get a clean scorecard, then you're gonna be right up there.
Before we close up, Paul, to close the chapter on the M3 before we start to run into the end. No, you're fine. And I could talk early Group A Subarus for hours if we want to follow that chapter right through. I'll ask you, are you brave enough to say who in your opinion could extract the most from the M3 on the stages in your experience? Is that too undiplomatic a question to answer?
No, because I can answer it really honestly. I mean, I would answer it is and it might be, so I'm sure you're going to say that, you couldn't pick one person out, and I'll tell you for why, because each person in different environments could get the best out of it. So, example, Chatriot could get the best out of an M3 in France, and Beguin in his day could as well. Duez in low grip could get the best out of an M3. Yeah. Snayers in tricky conditions, high grip, could get the best out of an M3. So Gregoire de Mavis was the same, because he'd grown up in Belgium. You know, he could get so much out of that car in low grip against Toyota four-wheel drive. Big
muddy Flanders cuts and that kind of
thing. Yeah, they were. You know, if you do Brothers Spa in the middle of winter, you know, and they do the camel stage on gravel tires, normally, you know, you'd think, oh, you get absolutely annihilated by the Toyota, but you know, they seem somehow to be able to still come out of that stage in a position to try and win the rally. You know, so Ireland, you know, always a question, Bertie or Austin, or you know, it's like, I think it's this, isn't it? It's
that could spark a lively debate.
I was going to say,
answer that one.
You're a braver man than me if you're touching that with a barge, Paul.
Yeah. But yeah.
I know it's the answer I kind of expected, because you can view all these guys in their own environment and element, and there isn't one guy, but you can see it's amazing to watch these guys take something to a different environment, excel at it there, and then you see these guys right at home somewhere else, and it's always interesting to see that too.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't see, you try and find a film with Chatriot or Beguin in oversteer, you're going to struggle. Mark Duez, you're going to find every bit of film you want. And then Patrick, you're going to find every bit of film you want. So there's a big difference straight away. So and it showed in the tire condition at the end of the stage, and you know, so they were probably ahead of the time. The modern driver now is fairly straight down the road as much as possible. So and maybe that comes from them knowing how to get the best time out of the car.
Well, Mark certainly gave us that impression, because when we were talking to him when he first made the transition to four-wheel drive, he really bemoaned the lack of, as he put it, the show of a rear-wheel drive car on the stages, and he certainly seemed to favour something with the drives to the rear. Yeah.
So we'll leave that bit of the book at that bit.
Yeah. And before we wrap up, I suppose we just said you were at Goodwood not so long ago, driving an Escort RS 1600. Is that your own car?
No, it's a guy called Steve Rimmer. He's got a big collection of cars.
Yes, the Dirtfish chap.
Yeah, so I've driven that car a few times actually. I drove it there about 3 or 4 years ago. Steve very kindly lets me drive some of his cars. I've driven his Legacy there, and he's got a Mark II as well. I've driven that. He's a great guy, and I'm very appreciated. I mean, love Escorts. You just can't. Yeah, they're just good fun. But now it's a nice weekend. Last year I drove the Burns' World Rally car on the hill.
That must have been special.
Yeah, because I've done it 3 years before another anniversary. But that's still a beautiful car. Even Safari trim on tarmac. You know, I'm there to drive that. And I did Shelby Walsh with that same year, because it was the anniversary of the championship. But that car's one of the most original ones in the world.
Yes, I saw you going up Chelsea last year on that, I think. I was there for that, so yeah.
Get about
that. Anniversaries keep on coming, don't they?
Yeah. I don't think I'll be around for the 50. I'll see if I can get to the 51 and see if I can just about get in one and drive it. No, Goodwood's Goodwood's. I did a thing down there where I remember going there for the first time. I think we went there first time in 19, I don't know, really early on, before I signed Petter. So that'd be 99 or 2000. And that top car park was just a Subaru truck and a couple of rally cars.
Was that the shootout with McRae? Or was that 2000?
That was a lot later, that. So that was last time I sat with Colin there. He came and drove the X12. I think he drove that. But no, it was really just before 99. It would have been, and it just shows how colossal that event has grown now. It's unbelievable.
It's a monster.
It's a real privilege to get to go there and to see everything and see a lot of people. You always go there and see people you haven't seen for 30 years or but, yeah.
I mean, speaking of a privilege, Paul, thanks so much for coming on and giving us so much of your time. It's been genuinely brilliant. We'll have to get you back if that's okay.
No problem. If you just let me know what you want to talk about.
There's heaps of stuff we could tease out of you, Paul. I'm sure you started wandering into one of my favorite subjects there now with early Group A legacies now, but we might have to save that one.
No, we'll talk about it again sometime.
I want to know about the bumpy bit in the Impreza WRC 97's rev range.
So what's that?
The infamous bumpy bit in the 97 Impreza that caused Colin quite a bit of consternation in that first year.
Yeah. And then World Rally cars, then that car, 97, 90, them cars, wow, just magic. Fit you like a glove to drive. Every advantage of the legacy went into the vice versa. So every advantage kept going, and then time you got to a 99 car, they were a Group 4 Escort but 4-wheel drive.
Yeah.
They're tremendous cars. Tremendous. We're restoring one at the moment for a client, and I can't wait to shake it down because it just does everything it says on the tin. And I'm staggered where the market's gone with them. I can see why people want a Group A car because it's so flattering to drive.
Oh dear.
Someday.
Someday.
Well, Paul, we might leave it there.
Okay.
Thanks so much again for coming on. You've been very kind. We wanted to talk about the M3 with someone with a working period knowledge of it for a long time. So it's been great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.